a split here, with his spirit or his essence exiting his body to fulfill his fantasy, to dream of, like in La La Land 3, breaking free of his soulless, repetitive existence to enter the wider world, to follow his literal heart, to travel into space, and to find love, or perhaps self-fulfillment. Existing in the United States as a trans woman is really hard right now. I guess you could call that my coming out on this channel. Sorry if it was anticlimactic. A lot of ink has been spilled on the concept of the coming out narrative in media and how it's greatly overemphasized in stories as the transformative moment, as this big momentous event after which your life is never the same. And it is that sometimes, but I've come out far too many times in far too many contexts to labor under the delusion that it's either a one-time thing or a particular milestone in my own personal development. Honestly, it's just another stressful conversation to have in a world that has consisted far too much of stressful conversations lately. I recently finished reading Nevada by Imogen Binnie. It captures the interiority of trans women, or should I say one particular trans woman, better than almost any other book I've read, and I highly recommend it. In a 2022 afterword, the author talked about how, in the book, she intentionally avoided the period of transition that's most focused on in fiction, the awkward middle part, the coming out, to instead tell a story of someone before that period, who has not even realized that they're trans yet, and someone after, largely finished with the messy mechanics of transition and fully living as a woman. She did this to emphasize how the lived experience of trans women is neither just like cis men before transition, nor is it just like cis women after, due to the material concerns of making sure you have enough money to afford hormones, navigating a world where some proportion of people want to kill you for literally no reason, etc. It's an incredible novel and is widely considered a classic, and the big bang of trans femme literature. All this to say that I am a trans woman, and yes, this is why I haven't been releasing videos on a regular schedule, why I've struggled to even play any games, let alone write any scripts, let alone record VO and edit them. Because existing in the United States as a trans woman is really hard right now. Anyway, let's talk about games. La La Land 4, released by GameMakerGames.com user The Anemic in April 2006, is the entry in the series that I think defies traditional explanation the most, at least besides the baffling first game. Back in November, I put out a video that attempted to analyze the entire La La Land series, form a coherent thesis on what they could mean, and make an argument for that thesis. I think I did a good job of that, but the section on La La Land 4 in particular was very challenging to me. I ended up making the argument, and with good basis I think, that 4 depicts a depersonalization that is common with working a dead-end job, with being exploited for your labor, and how the only escape is one of fantasy and dreaming that inevitably leads back to the beginning of the cycle. This is consistent with the continued themes of capitalism sucking your soul dry that appear in La La Land 5, and with the series themes as a whole. However, the reason why that section was so challenging for me to write is that, upon playing it for the first time in several years for that video, I immediately knew what it reminded me of, and what my analysis should be. But to present and properly argue this analysis, I would have to reveal more of myself than I was comfortable with at the time. Plainly said, when viewed in a vacuum, La La Land 4 is begging to be read as a trans allegory. I still think my original analysis holds up, but when rewatching it now, it's clear that it is just my real reading of the text, with the trans parts more or less cut out with a scalpel. But I was never happy with that compromise, and everything is different now, so let's take another look, shall we? In La La Land 4, we see our main character, Bigot, trapped in his own head, stuck in a dead-end job and disassociating while working. After his boss comes up to snap him back to reality, which cues in a consistent rumbling static sound, he deals with an incoherent and demanding customer, literally pushing them until they leave, and that's where things get interesting. In the next scene, our protagonist boards a heart-shaped spaceship, which rises up with an ascending sine tone and soars into space, accompanied by a beautiful tune replacing the static. It deposits him on the moon, where a figure who looks an awful lot like a female version of him waits at the left side of the screen. Bigot runs towards her, but everything is happening in slow motion, and just as it appears that he's making meaningful progress, he is snapped back with a harsh beep, and the music is once again replaced by the oppressive static. Still trying to reach her, Bigot is snapped backwards again and again until the scene changes to a black starry void, with the female version of himself replaced by a giant gaping copy of his own head. He is forced to run, to the right, in the opposite direction as before, and the head is faster than him, always gaining, always encroaching, doomed to catch him. Finally, Bigot reaches a bed, and the head flies away, much like the customer did. But it is only a moment of respite before the bed, with an ominous descending sign, sinks into the ground, and we return to Bigot at his job, weeping uncontrollably with the text, "And that was that." Gender dysphoria is a tricky thing to talk about. Broadly speaking, it describes the disconnect between your internal sense of gender and the gender that you are perceived as. For example, I feel like a girl, but I look like a boy. In recent years, though, it has become well understood that this feeling manifests itself in much more complicated and unexpected ways than just, I feel like a girl, but I look like a boy. One common symptom of dysphoria is an intense disassociation and depersonalization, the feeling that the person you see in the mirror isn't really you, the feeling that you're not even real, a general apathy and disconnection from your own body. It can also be divorced from external perception entirely. The dysphoria that comes from having the wrong hormones in your body is difficult to explain, aside from simple analogies like putting gas in a diesel engine, but it feels something like being constantly bombarded with oppressive static that makes executive function difficult and dulls your sense of everything. For those who have experienced this all their lives, or at least since the onset of puberty, it's incredibly difficult to identify that this is even happening until it's gone, until your body is finally running on the right fuel, and the world snaps into color after being in black and white for as long as you can remember. As I said in the original La La Land video, I don't think that it matters at all that this is almost certainly not what the author of the games intended them to mean. The intended meaning of a piece of art is far less important than the meanings that are drawn from the audience, and what I see in La La Land 4 is a story of a character who's stuck in a life he hates. Bad boss, mean customers, repetitive dull work, day in and day out. His only escape from his life, the only place where the static doesn't hammer his psyche all the time, is in his fantasies, where he tries to reach a version of himself that is beautiful and happy and all the things that he wants to be. But he is stuck in slow motion and unable to reach her, and instead the huge, insurmountable, and inescapable reality of himself forces him to the only other escape he has from the constant onslaught: sleep. But this is a temporary respite. To sleep, after all, will only hasten the start of the next day, where he's a little older and a little further from the beautiful girl that he so desperately wants to be, even if he cannot realize it. I Saw the TV Glow is a 2024 film written and directed by Jane Schoenbrunn and released by A24. In it, we follow the character of Owen, who meets an upperclassman named Maddie and forms a fast bond with her over the Pink Opaque, a kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer if it was on Nick at Night show about two psychically linked girls, Isabel and Tara. Owen cannot watch the Pink Opaque at home due to his early bedtime, so the two concoct a subterfuge and have a sleepover at Maddie's house, where they can stay up as late as they want, at least before her violent stepfather returns home in the morning. The plan works, and he is entranced by the Pink Opaque. As Owen grows throughout high school, he folds within himself. His mother, with whom he was always close, becomes seriously ill, and she can tell he's struggling, but can't quite articulate why. His only solace is the VHS tapes that Maddie still leaves him at school, a measure for him to circumvent his still strictly enforced bedtime, although he must hide even these from his father. One night, they concoct another sleepover plan. It's been years since Owen has seen the Pink Opaque live as it aired, so he again makes an excuse to his parents and goes to Maddie's basement to watch the new episode. Afterwards, Maddie confesses that staying in this town, living with her stepdad, is going to kill her. She tells Owen to come over again next week and not tell anybody. They can escape together. They can finally be free. Owen wakes up in the morning and immediately rats Maddie out, spoiling her plan, and the two never speak again. About a year later, Maddie disappears, leaving only her TV set on fire in the backyard. Owen's mom dies soon after, and he's left living with his dad, working in a movie theater in his early 20s. He's stuck in a life he hates. Bad boss, asshole coworkers, repetitive dull work, day in and day out. The only place where the static doesn't hammer at his psyche all the time is when watching the Pink Opaque on the tapes that Maddie left him. It's still his favorite show, and the only place where he can find some semblance of happiness. but he's stuck in slow motion in real life, or maybe it's like skipping forward faster and faster. Either way, he's stuck in an endless loop of the same miserable existence that he has no idea how to escape. I won't spoil the rest of the plot. It's an incredibly crafted film and you need to go see it, but the story is one likely to make many people confused. It's billed, after all, as a horror film, but there aren't really any jump scares, any gore, just this strange, sad story of a man a little too stuck in the media of his childhood. Right? If you're trans, I thought the TV Glow is a terrifyingly vivid depiction of what it looks like to know on some level that you need to transition, but not doing it. This is absolutely 100% intentional on the part of the film, and it is told with brutal efficacy. Seeing it in the theater was an especially affecting experience. In multiple scenes, the majority of the audience were nonplussed, bored, or actively laughing at what was happening while I was pinned to my seat, feeling like I was being crushed to death. It's a special thing for a film to be able to effectively foreshadow its own conclusion, but make you not want to believe it so badly that you convince yourself that they would never let it in that way, that they wouldn't do that, hoping and praying for any way out of the end that you've known was inevitable from the start. Like I say, it's an incredible film. Please go watch it. It's also the film that finally made me start hormones. But let's rewind a bit before I tell you about that. On September 12th, 2020, I realized I was trans. I didn't know exactly in what way, but I knew. It's funny what your brain will piece together when you're spending the majority of your time isolated, in a state away from everyone you know, and with a global pandemic keeping you at home. When I was in college, I was unhappy a lot of the time, and I didn't know why. I couldn't understand why I felt so disconnected from everything and everyone around me. I couldn't understand why I wasn't normal. I developed a kind of obsession with self-improvement, with interrogating my every thought and action and looking for the truth, the unifying theory for why I felt so wrong for almost a decade. And then, I found it. Disparate memories, things I never thought twice about at the time, came back to me. The way I always wore my hair long, the way I felt men's restrooms were foreign, hostile spaces to set foot in, the way that when I started growing facial hair, I began shaving it in secret, not wanting anybody to know what was happening, terrified and disgusted that I was becoming a man, but without the words to express it. Locked inside a body that grew more and more unrecognizable every day as my face hardened and my frame grew, until the person looking back at me in the mirror felt like a stranger, a surreal shadow of my real self. Unrecognizable. All this locked into place in an instant. All this locked into place slowly over years of processing, thinking, talking, and remembering. I had the answer. I knew what was wrong with me. And that was enough. Right? I changed the way I dressed, and that was enough, right? I wore nail polish and tried makeup, and that was enough, right? I experimented with my identity online, and that was enough, right? Right? When I realized I was trans, it was like I'd solved a puzzle. Satisfying, intellectual, all the pieces fit together, and it was completely, totally, and emphatically not enough. Remember all the stuff from earlier about chemical dysphoria, the kind that comes with not putting the right hormones in your body? That's all from personal experience. When I realized I was trans, it helped alleviate some of the dysphoria I felt because I could finally understand what was going on and change my behavior and presentation accordingly. But as the years moved on, it became overwhelmingly clear that the static was still there. Now I knew why it was there, and that helped, for a little while, but over months and years in the background, it grew again. And as it turned into a deafening cacophony, I felt more and more lost. It's not like I didn't want to try hormones, just, later. It's so easy to convince yourself of that, isn't it? To take the thing that you know you need to do and invent 1,000 reasons why it would be the smarter thing, the more prudent thing, the right thing to wait. To just let things play out and then get back to it. Later. Starting a slew of new creative projects has always been my go-to coping mechanism. Sure, I indulge in more traditional ways of numbing the pain from time to time, but no, my number one reliable way to cope is diving into some inadvisably complex project with both feet. And after all, I was a part of the game maker community for a decade. I have a deep love and passion for all those old games, and I love watching video essays on YouTube.com. Why shouldn't I take a crack at it? I was struggling, and I didn't even know how to admit it. As it became clear that the US presidential election would once again be a matchup between Donald Trump and the decaying corpse of neoliberalism, I felt a crushing dread, and so I ignored all that and started talking about the games of my youth into a microphone. The worst part is that I knew. I knew why I was struggling with executive dysfunction, with emotional regulation, with disassociation, with the static roaring in my brain. I knew. But I pretended not to. For the past 5 or so years, the Republican Party has been mounting an all-out war on the existence of trans people, through bathroom bills, sports bills, anti-drag bills, assaults on care for trans youth, and a ceaseless, unending avalanche of rhetoric that calls trans people groomers, perverts, pedophiles, and a dozen other things that seem an awful lot like projection. Contrary to popular belief, the general public is not very transphobic, and it has taken a truly mind-boggling amount of money and more than a few electoral defeats to budge the needle on this at all. But budget they have, and more importantly, they've been able to create the perception that there is an organic backlash against trans rights rather than the one they've bought, and they're using this to roll back everything from employment protections to healthcare. I knew I needed to try hormones, but I was so afraid that I would start them and they would fix everything, and I would finally be happy again, and then they would be torn away from me by people who want nothing more than for me to end my own life. I didn't think I could handle that, so I decided that I could survive. I decided to wait and see. And then I watched I Saw the TV Glow, and it broke me. And then I started the hormones, and I think it was the first good thing I ever did in my life. On May 6, 1933, the Magnus Hirschfeld Institut für Sexualwissenschaft in Berlin was raided and the contents destroyed by members of the Nazi Party. It was the first institute in the world dedicated to sexology, and its extensive library held a vast amount of research on gay, intersex, and transgender people that was so groundbreaking for the time that we are only fully beginning to recreate it now, almost a century later. The Nazis declared it was un-German and burned it. It's 2025, and the US government is once again trying to erase us, to destroy all our research, to bury our stories, and pretend we just appeared a few years ago to cause all the problems of the world. It's so easy for fascist governments to do this, largely because it keeps happening over and over again, with the Hirschfeld Institute, with the AIDS crisis, with the modern purging of government websites, and the sites of any organization that wants to receive federal funding. I said earlier that Nevada by Imogene Binney was seen as a big bang for transfem-lit, and that's true, but it was also only published in 2013. It is by no definition the first book of its kind, and the author is the first to acknowledge that, but I think part of the reason why it's viewed this way is because of the endless cycle that we as trans people continue to go through, of a brief period of acceptance and public visibility, followed by a reactionary backlash, manufactured or otherwise, and our history being erased all over again, while we go back underground and hibernate for the next cycle to pass. Like catching a glimpse into a better world before being awoken once again by the dreary, cruel machine of the everyday. So why am I making this video? It's partially an explanation of where I've been, it's partially an analysis of La La Land 4, but mostly I think it's a request. If you're in my audience, I'm sure you know how I feel about archiving and maintaining pieces of media, of internet detritus, that risk becoming lost forever. Archive.org is one of my most valuable resources in making these videos, and there are already rumblings from the new administration that it and Wikipedia will be targets for their crimes of hosting uncensored material and actually reporting facts. So here's my first request. Do not let us be erased again. Online publication The Transfeminine Review recently started an article series called The Transliterature Preservation Project that provides simple, actionable ways to help prevent the destruction of our literature and our history. I suspect that my audience, like me, have a fascination with lost media. Well, this media is some of the most at risk of becoming lost right now, and it's up to us to prevent that from happening. I'm linking this article in the description, obviously, and I encourage you to go check that out, and think about archiving yourself, even if it's only a couple of things. Every little bit helps. The more places a piece of writing exists, the harder it is to destroy. They may be trying to burn the Hirschfeld Library again, but the books have already been copied, and with your help, they will be so many places that they can never destroy them all. My second request is to a very specific and narrow section of my audience. The rest of you can just start singing the 1945 theme now if you like. But if you think you may be trans, if any part of this video resonated with you, but you're scared to think about it because of where the world is right now, I need you to think about it. If you're trans and you want to start HRT, but you're afraid to because of the world right now, I need you to start it. The world, and the United States in particular, is scarier for us than it has been in a long time, but I need you to know that it's worth it. Remember when I thought it would be better to not start HRT because starting it and having it yanked away would be worse than never starting it at all? The thing is, I was wrong. I had it all backwards. Before I knew what my life could be like on the right hormones, I was drowning and lost, and I convinced myself that it was better to stay that way. But now I'm alive, truly alive, and that alone is enough for me to keep fighting. Fighting for my own life, and the lives of my trans brothers and sisters and siblings. Now that I've had a taste of real life, there's nothing anybody can do that will convince me to give it up. So join me, and let's fight together. Also, yeah, I know, Snail Man. I really had a way of picking highly gendered usernames when I was a kid. Sue me.